So he tried this emotional blackmail on his dad. He was going to bring Meghan and the kids, Archie and Lilibet, and of course the king would get to see his beloved grandchildren for the first time in 4 years.
They will not receive full police protection, which may have included, by the way, a police motorcade for when they are travelling, and that is Harry's dream.
My understanding is that the king is absolutely resolute that it's nothing to do with him. He's not going to interfere. He's never interfered. He's left it up to Ravik.
Harry wants the whole 9 yards. That when he's in the United Kingdom and he gets into a car, there are motorbikes in front of him, SUVs, tanks, helicopters.
It didn't start with a cancellation. It started with a threat that no one dared to say out loud. A grandfather waiting and a son holding the moment hostage. Because what happens when a royal reunion turns into leverage? What happens when the one thing a king wants most becomes the one thing he can't control? Picture this carefully, because every detail matters. A king not in a throne room, not in front of cameras, but alone scrolling through a phone, waiting for a message that never arrives. Not a political crisis, not a scandal. Something colder. Silence. The kind of silence that feels intentional, the kind that says something is being withheld. And suddenly, what was supposed to be a family visit begins to look like a negotiation. Prince Harry was expected to bring Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet to the UK, not for optics, not for headlines, but for something deeper, a moment that insiders say King Charles had quietly placed at the center of his entire year. A rare chance, a fragile hope. And then, just like that, conditions appeared. No security, no children.
I think this was the plan all along. It was to sort of build King Charles up and Britain to the idea that our king is finally going to get to see his grandchildren again, and then to whip that away from the king and the nation by saying, well, you still won't give me that gun guard, police armed protection that I need, that I demand, so you won't give it to me. So nah, I'm not going to bring Meghan and the kids back now. I think that Harry actually thought that if he could set up this meeting between his kids, Archie and Lilibet, and the king, that the security he demanded, or he's been demanding now for a couple of years, would suddenly fall into place. He'd get that automatic armed police protection he's always demanded, and everything would be hunky-dory. But of course, they've turned round, the authorities here, and said, look, that doesn't make any difference. You're not getting an armed guard. Your British taxpayers are not going to pay for police protection for you, mate. You ran away. You're not a front-line royal. You're not getting it.
That's not a scheduling conflict. That's a line drawn. Because this wasn't spontaneous. No, the itinerary had already been shared. Preparations had already begun. Emotion had already been invested. And then suddenly withdrawal. Why? Why build anticipation only to pull it away? Why let this story rise just enough before collapsing it in public view? That's where the whispers began. Because when something looks this carefully timed, people stop calling it coincidence. And then comes the paperwork. 40 pages. Not rumors, not feelings documents. A privately commissioned risk assessment claiming danger, claiming threat, claiming that Harry's presence could turn a public event into a target. But here's the part that doesn't sit quietly. The decision was never his father's to make. It never was. 4 people. That's it. 4 individuals in the entire royal structure received that level of protection. And every one of them is actively working, visibly present, constantly exposed. Harry isn't. He stepped away, publicly, deliberately, years ago. So the system recalculated, not out of spite, not out of punishment, but because the rules didn't change for him. He changed his position within them. So then the question sharpens: if the answer has been no for 3 years, why push again now? Why bring out a 40-page report knowing it won't overturn legal rulings already lost twice? Because maybe it was never meant to. Maybe the audience wasn't the court. Maybe the audience was watching something else unfold entirely. Listen closely to how the narrative shifts here. This stops being about security and starts becoming about perception. Timing becomes everything. Friday, the visit is confirmed. The children are coming. A king allows himself, just for a moment, to feel something dangerously close to happiness. Saturday, the story leaks. Security issues, doubt, uncertainty, and suddenly the entire plan is hanging by a thread, publicly. Not a private conversation, not a closed-door discussion. The press. That's not communication. That's That's positioning, because when anticipation is built publicly and then removed publicly, the pressure doesn't disappear, it redirects. It lands somewhere.
Hold up, stop the presses. I thought this was all settled, that they weren't going to get their security, and there was this back and forth, and recapping this story and looking at what was said in the press. It looked like he wasn't going to get the security. This is not really new news, okay? We just weren't told that they were bringing Harry and Meghan, or, that Harry was bringing Meghan and the kids. We weren't told that King Charles had offered them a royal residence. We weren't told that, Harry had finally found a way to make this trip happen, considering we just started hearing stories about, Meghan's coming and the kids are coming, okay? Now, let me just tell you how I believe that whole story around the kids and Meghan even coming to the UK happened. Because I don't think that was actually, out there. We just heard the news, and still people are saying, they're not going to come, they're not going to come. As I've always said in the beginning, how this worked, because it never made sense that Harry was saying that I can't bring my family to the UK because it's not safe. We know that is a bunch of malarkey. We know that is a bunch of gobbledygook. That don't make no sense.
So now Harry is apparently, this is what I wanted to get your take on, this is extraordinary. He's shelled out yet more money on a 40-page risk assessment by a security organisation that he's paid for, and he's now presented this to the government, and it says that the Duke of Sussex, when he comes to host the Invictus Games, could be a serious terrorist target, and that could create a mass casualty event.
But where? On a government panel that already said no? Or on a father who can't override the system but still feels the emotional cost of every decision? That's the tension sitting underneath everything. Because King Charles reportedly said it himself, plainly, directly, I do not decide on these matters. 4 words. Final, clear, and yet the story didn't stop. It escalated. And now the comparisons begin to creep in. Quietly at first, then louder. Public figures moving freely without protection. Systems working exactly as designed. No exceptions, no shortcuts. And that's where the discomfort deepens, because this isn't about whether the system is broken. It isn't. It's about what happens when someone expects it to bend and it doesn't. So what was the real objective here? A single visit or something much bigger? Because if this request had been approved, it wouldn't have ended in Birmingham. It would have set a precedent, a pattern, a new standard that could follow Harry across borders, across events, across every future appearance. And suddenly the stakes look very different, because now the question isn't just will the children come, it's what was this moment really being used for?
Tried this emotional blackmail on his dad. His father has told him, I do not decide on these matters. I can't help you there. So now Harry is apparently, this is what I wanted to get your take on, this is extraordinary. He's shelled out yet more money on a 40-page risk assessment by a security organisation that he's paid for, and he's now presented this to the government, and it says that the Duke of Sussex, when he comes to host the Invictus Games, could be a serious terrorist target, and that could create a mass casualty event. This is a private security firm saying that. In other words, if Harry comes, there'll be the possibility of a mass casualty event if he's the subject of a terrorist attack. Well, and he's given this to the government to say, well, there you go, you've got to give me armed guards. Well, I would say if that's true, don't come. Don't put other people at risk, just don't come. This is getting ridiculous, Kinsey.
Yeah, this is the same report, I believe, that he was putting together when he was threatening the NYPD, his team sending the NYPD emails saying we're going to get Gavin Newsom involved, the governor of California. We need your assistance here. We need you to back us up. That there was a high-speed car chase throughout the streets of New York after Meghan Markle accepted another trophy, which the mayor at the time, Eric Adams, came out and said, well, that's ludicrous. And NYPD was like, this is not even remotely close to the truth. And so Harry's team was emailing the NYPD, trying to strong arm them, saying, you know, don't make us get Governor Gavin Newsom involved of the state of California. And the NYPD was like, nice try. This isn't working.
And that's where the silence gets louder. Because when a reunion becomes conditional, when timing starts to feel strategic, when emotion starts to look like leverage, you're no longer watching a family disagreement. And just when you think this story has already revealed its sharpest edge, it twists. Because what followed the cancellation didn't feel like aftermath. It felt like choreography, like two completely different worlds colliding in the same exact moment and daring the public to notice the contrast. Sit with this, because it's the kind of detail that doesn't scream, it lingers. A grandfather loses the chance to see his grandchildren again. A city that spent months preparing for a royal visit is left scrambling, plans dissolving in less than 72 hours. Volunteers briefed, venues prepared, expectations quietly built, and then gone, not gradually, instantly. And while all of that is unfolding almost in the same breath, another headline appears. A product launch, a promotion, something polished, timed, and ready to go live in the exact same news cycle. Coincidence or collision?
It is a soap opera. It has got everything that you would expect from a chaotic appearance of Harry and Meghan and their desperation to get maximum attention, maximum coverage. But this time they've got no one else they can blame for the clown circus, which is now surrounding this entire trip, because it was their operational notes that they decided to give to the media on Friday, being security conscious and all, which has left a lot of people with a lot of egg on their faces. In fact, when I was at the ball Saturday night, I met a lovely lady in the toilets in a beautiful red dress, and she said to me, you're going to have to eat your shoe. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Why? And then it's down to me saying, I'm gonna eat my shoe if they bring the kids over. Do you remember me saying that? Well, she did.
He has lost his ever-loving mind. He cannot deal with the no. And he's losing it. He's completely lost it, okay? So Harry is saying that they went back on their word in the 11th hour. They're saying, or Harry is saying, that I just may not even bring my children now to the UK or my wife because you guys changed your mind. You were supposed to give me security. Well, that's not what happened. What happened was Harry was making it sound as if he was going to get the security before it was actually even ruled on, and he wanted to force their hand. He wanted to say, I'm going to put it out there. Well, I'm sure to get it, and, you know, it's nailed on. And he was making all these things in the press to intimidate, to bully, to try to connive his way into some security without an official ruling on it.
Because across the same timeline, something else happens that barely needs to speak to be understood. The Princess of Wales releases a video not reacting, not addressing, not even acknowledging the chaos, but simply showing results. Work completed. A challenge finished. Quietly, no buildup, no leaks, no suspense, just outcome. And suddenly, without anyone saying it out loud, two narratives are standing side by side. One asking for attention, the other earning it. And that's when the pattern starts to become impossible to ignore, because this isn't the first time timelines have overlapped like this. It's not the first time one side generates noise while the other delivers silence followed by substance. But this time, the gap feels wider, sharper, almost deliberate. One moment says, look at what's happening to me. The other says, look at what we've done. And whether intended or not, the comparison writes itself. Now step back. Look at the full sequence. The anticipation, the condition, the withdrawal, the leak, the cancellation, the promotion, the counter story. This isn't random movement. This is rhythm. A sequence that repeats just enough times to stop feeling accidental. And that's where the story splits into two completely different readings, both uncomfortable, both impossible to ignore. The first is human, painfully human. A man shaped by loss, by fear, by a history where protection failed in the most devastating way imaginable. A father now trying to control every variable, trying to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself. Seen through that lens, every demand, every hesitation, every condition becomes something else entirely. Not manipulation, not strategy, but fear expressed badly, clumsily, publicly. But then there's the second reading, the colder one, the one that doesn't rely on emotion but on pattern. Because when similar situations keep unfolding the same way, public escalation, strategic timing, emotional stakes raised at just the right moment, it starts to look less like fear and more like design, not spontaneous, structured, not reactive, calculated. And once you see that possibility, it's hard to unsee. Because think about what this moment really offered. Not just a reunion, not just a visit, but leverage. The one thing powerful enough to bend attention, to shift headlines, to create pressure where direct authority doesn't exist. A king who cannot change the rules, but who can feel their consequences more deeply than anyone else involved. And that's the part no one wants to say too loudly. Because if this was leverage, then it was aimed with precision, not at a system, not at a panel, but at a person. So where does that leave everything now? Because the question hasn't actually been answered. It's just been delayed. Will Harry still come? Will the children remain absent? Will the moment that almost happened quietly disappear? Or will it return again under different terms, different pressure, different timing? That uncertainty is the real ending here. Not resolution, not closure, just tension stretching forward, because every previous chapter in this story eventually found a landing, a meeting, a statement, a fragile pause that allowed things to continue. But this one feels different. It hasn't settled, it hasn't softened, it's still moving. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all, because when something refuses to land, it means it's not over. It means the next move is already forming, somewhere just out of view.